In the previous video clip, we addressed the first two of these questions. This short video clip will address the last three. First, what is the pattern of reproduction? A species' reproductive strategy can affect its potential for growth. The term reproductive strategy refers to the pattern a population shows with regards to reproduction. For example, its lifespan, its maturity age, the number of offspring per litter, etc. These characteristics are all biologically driven. The population doesn't sit around and strategize about how they should approach reproduction. We commonly refer to two general reproductive strategies, R-adapted species and K-adapted species. The R in R-adapted species refers to the population's growth rate. Generally, R-selected species have high growth rates and can thus easily colonize areas, and they can adapt well to unpredictable environments. Notably, if a large percentage of the population is wiped out, for instance by a fire, the population can grow quickly back up to its original size. Thus they are adapted to unstable environments. Notably, they often experience boom and bust cycles as they overshoot carrying capacities and crash. Many weeds fall into this category, as do mice and many insects. The K in K-adapted species refers to the population's carrying capacity. These populations tend to reproduce slowly and have a lower rate of increase, often leveling out close to the carrying capacity. These organisms are likely less able to recover quickly after a disaster and tend to not do as well in unstable environments. Thus, they tend to do better in stable environments. Here's a list that compares typical traits for R-selected species with typical traits for K-selected species. One way to look at this concept is to consider that a population's ultimate goal is to reproduce and continue on for future generations. R-adapted species accomplish this by reproducing in great numbers, but allocating very little care or resources to any individual. They have small bodies, reach reproductive age very quickly, and reproduce many, many offspring, which they don't spend any energy caring for. Their strategy is to simply put hundreds or thousands or millions of individuals out there in hopes that a few survive. On the other hand, the K-adapted species puts lots of energy into a few individuals. The organism grows slowly, reaching reproductive age late in life, has just a few young, and cares for their young for a long period of time. The strategy is to put all the energy into a few individuals such that they are strong and able to survive and reproduce. Lastly, it's worth noting that not all species fit nicely into the R-adapted profile or the K-adapted profile. Some species may have some of the R traits and some of the K-adapted traits. See the infographic on the previous slide and note that they displayed the range from R to K as a continuum. Just as a species may have a specific pattern related to reproduction, they may also have a specific pattern related to mortality. The graph here demonstrates three typical mortality patterns. Type 1 shows a species, in this case humans, that tends to have high survival rates until later in life, at which point the likelihood of mortality is high. Type 2 shows a species that has about the same likelihood of mortality all throughout its life. And type 3 shows a species that has a high mortality rate early in life, but if it survives that period, it tends to live a long life. Understanding mortality patterns can help population ecologists understand how to better manage the population, and at what stages in the life cycle the population may need extra protection. Notably, as with reproductive patterns, some species don't fall neatly into one category. In the example here, the herring gull has characteristics of both type 2 and type 3. It initially starts as type 3 as there is high mortality when the chick is young, defenseless, and in a nest on the ground. However, if the individual survives this initial age, the mortality reduces and it remains somewhat constant throughout its lifetime. The last of our 5 questions asks what the age structure of the population is. Just as with human populations, the age structure of a population is important. Population ecologists analyze age structure along with the reproduction and mortality patterns to determine if a population is likely to be increasing or decreasing in the near future. The age structure diagrams shown here are for 3 hypothetical human populations. Similar diagrams, though, can be developed for any type of population. Age structure diagrams typically show the number or proportion of a population of each gender at each age. Often ecologists are not able to get detailed age and gender data for a population, but estimates can still be valuable. As you study the diagram, consider the impact of each type of age structure on the population. In closing, we have worked our way through the various questions population ecologists ask when studying a population. Notably, demographers, people who study human populations, often ask the same sort of questions as population ecologists who are studying populations of species other than humans. Now let's go back and consider the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone National Park, and think of how these 5 questions may have helped population ecologists monitor, protect, and restore the population. Often, though, it's also important to look beyond the population, to the relationship the target population has with other members of the ecological community, as well as the impact the population has on the ecosystem of which it is a part. In our next topic, we will be addressing community ecology. But for now, let's just stress the importance that a predator has on the rest of the ecological community and the health of the ecosystem. The reintroduction of wolves in Yellowstone resulted in many other populations being affected, sometimes in ways that were even surprising to the ecologists managing the program. The infographic shown here was from a previous edition of the textbook, where they highlighted the importance of wolves on other populations. For example, the first edition of the textbook noted that without wolves, the willows were overgrazed, which led to the demise of beavers and songbirds. With fewer beaver, there were less beaver dams, which meant less diverse riparian areas, and less pools, which meant less fish. Conversely, when wolves were reintroduced, they noted decreased elk populations, which increased the willows and thus increased the beavers, which led to more songbirds and also more fish and greater groundwater levels. The current edition of the textbook has stepped back a bit on the effect of wolf introduction on beavers, but more recent data now suggests that indeed the beavers are increasing. I encourage you to research the current status of different populations in the Yellowstone ecosystem. How many different populations in the Yellowstone ecological community can you list that were affected by the wolf reintroduction? Specifically, how was each population you listed affected? What other ecosystem effects were seen? Meaning, what effects were there on the non-living landscape? Do you think it's right for predators to be reintroduced to their home habitats, even if they may pose a threat to some human property nearby? All great questions.